In the quiet of the evening, where shadows softly play, a fairy tale wolf sheds his skin, gently drifting away, with a twinkle in his eye and a heart full of dreams. He waits for the Friday night glow, where the magic redeems. Oh, the wolf in the moonlight, he's found his true call, reading tales of wonder for one and for all. In a world of stars dancing, his spirit takes flight, with stories of beauty under the starlit night. He picks up a book, the pages worn and wise, every line a whisper under the vast skies, from far off lands where the wild things roam, to enchanted forests where the heart finds home. Oh, the wolf in the moonlight, he's found his true call, reading tales of wonder for one and for all. In a world of stars dancing, his spirit takes flight, with stories of beauty under the starlit night. With every word he reads, he casts a spell of peace, transporting all who listen to a land where joy won't cease. For in these fairy tales, amidst the laughter and tears, the wolf finds his solace, he conquers his fears. As the night grows deeper, he serenades the moon with melodies that linger, a soft and soothing tune. In this sacred hour, where magic abounds, the fairy tale wolf writes love into sound. Oh, the wolf in the moonlight, he's found his true.
Okay, it looks like the ads should be over. Apparently I tried to double layer them, that's why I had two trivia questions going at the same time. President Wilson's ambitious plan for peace had 14 points, and New York City is a vibrant host of the annual Charlie Parker Jazz Festival. Congrats on getting first, Salty. So, tonight's going to be the start of the last color fairy book. I may see if I can find more of the Andrew Lang stuff to read. Otherwise, I'll be probably doing Children's Hour or one of the other sets. Yes, I'm going to keep Friday as fairy tales. Yes, fairy tales and fables as it seems to be going. I know I'm not the best energy level right now, but I'm not nearly as upset as Andrew Lang is reading this preface. Good lord. But I hope everyone's had a good week. Either happily eventful or peacefully not. I really need to find better music for the scene. It just goes silent for too long. I'd have to dig through all my music that I have. Mind you, I do have purchased music to use for streams, but I think most of them are better for video games than they are for live streaming. It's only 9:04, so I don't want to skip over to the reading window that fast. I know I'm going to have to really buckle down and see if I can get Grimm's Fairy Tales Book 4 done. Starting with my, finding my list of stories that I wanted to put in it. But all the stories I have in the books are ones that I have narrated online, while on stream. So it's like the very beginning of the series. I think I was reading through Jack Zipes' complete Grimm's Fairy Tales, and I made my list based off of that. But I'm going through and finding other versions and copies to work on. Hey, Guilty. Congrats on second. Anyway, just talking about getting stuff ready so I can start putting together book 4. Not that it's been requested by anyone outside of family. But, yeah. And this is the last of the fairy book series. No, there's one or two others that are actually fairy tales, but they're not color coordinated. Because there's like the poetry book, there's a Book of Heroes, Arabian Nights Entertainment, there's the Glimmet and Chat. I have no idea what a Glimmet is, but I guess I'll try to catch it. I think it's funny that Dusk's rigged a trigger to have someone throw a ball for. It's actually pretty clever. It's only 9:07 on the last Friday of February. And we're getting into a new book. I will put a link to the book if anyone wants to purchase a copy from Grey Wolf. It's, it really does help me a little if people buy books from my site. But it's another one I get to add on the as read by, and I'm going to see if I can figure out how to do book plates and get those on the Fourth Wall site. So there's more merch. I was looking at my tax info for Twitch, and I've made less than $400 this year. And I know I sure as hell have spent more than that. And the books aren't selling, and I don't want to think about that kind of stuff right now. So, let's go over to the fairy tale screen. So this is the book we're getting into. Well, the book that's... Oh, there's a cat on the bed. Cool. Look at that pretty cat. Anyway. I would love to get an older copy of this, but I have a new reprint that I always try to make sure the unedited full print ones, so it makes me wonder how people can get so much money selling these when they literally just copy everything. They don't put any work into it like I do on mine. I'm not like doing straight copy paste shit. I'm actually adding to mine. But anyway, everyone feel free to settle back, get comfortable, and I will start reading. The Lilac Fairy Book. Preface. What cases are you engaged in at present? Are you stopping many teeth just now? What people have you converted lately? The ladies put these questions to men, lawyers, dentists, clergymen, and so forth, who happen to sit next to them at dinner parties. I do not know whether ladies thus indicate their interest in the occupations of their casual neighbors at the hospitable board. But if they do not know me, or do not know me well, they generally ask, "Are you writing anything right now?" As if they should ask a painter, "Are you painting anything right now?" or a lawyer, "Have you any cases at present?" Sometimes they are more definite and inquire, "What are you writing, right? What are you writing now?" As if I must be writing something, which indeed is the case, though I dislike being reminded of it. It is an awkward question, because the fair being does not care a bobby what I'm writing, nor would she much be enlightened if I reply, "Madam, I am engaged on a treatise intended to prove the normal is prior to conceptual totemism." Though that answer would be as true, in fact, as obscure as significance. The best plan seems to be to answer that I have entirely abandoned mere literature, and am contemplating a book on the causes of early blight in the potato, a melancholy circumstance which threatens to deprive us of our chief esculent root. The inquirer would never be undeceived. One nymph who, like the rest, could not keep off this horrid topic of my occupation, said, "You never write anything but fairy books, do you?" A French gentleman, too, an educationist and expert in portraits of Queen Mary, once sent me a newspaper article in which he had written that I was exclusively devoted to the composition of fairy books, and nothing else. Then he came to England and visited me, and found that I knew rather more about portraits of Queen Mary than he did. In truth, I never did write any fairy books in my life, except Prince Prigio, Prince Ricardo, and Tales from the Fairy Court, that of the aforesaid Prigio. I take this opportunity to recommending these fairy books, poor things, but my own, to parents and guardians who may never have heard them. They are rich in romantic adventure, and the prince always marry the right princesses and live happily ever afterwards, while the wicked witches, stepmothers, tutors, and governesses are never cruelly punished, but retire to the country on ample pensions. I hate cruelty. I never put a wicked stepmother in a barrel and sent her tobogganing down a hill. It is true that Prince Ricardo did kill the yellow dwarf, but that wasn't a fair fight, sword in hand, and the dwarf, peace to his ashes, died in harness. The object of these confessions is not only that of the advertising of my own fairy books, which are not out of print if your bookseller says so, the truth is not in him, but giving credit where credit is due. The fairy books have been almost wholly the work of Mrs. Lang, who has translated and adapted them from French, German, Portuguese, Italian, Spanish, Catalan, and other languages. My part has been that of Adam, according to Mark Twain, in the Garden of Eden. Eve worked, Adam superintended. I also superintend. I find out where the stories are, advise, and, in short, superintend. That's okay. I do not write the stories out of my own head. The reputation of having written all the fairy books, a European reputation in nurseries, and the United States of America, is the burden of an honor unto which I was not born. It weighs upon me and is killing me as a general fash of being the wife of the Lord of Burleigh. Burleigh House by Stamford Town was too much the villain major and espoused by that peer. Nobody really wrote most of the stories. People told them in all parts of the world long before Egyptian hieroglyphs or Cretan signs or Cyprian syllables and alphabets were invented. They are older than reading and writing, and arose like wildflowers before men had any education to quarrel over. The grannies told them to their grandchildren, and then the grandchildren became grannies. They repeated the same old tales to the new generation. Homer knew the stories and made up the Odyssey out of half a dozen of them. All of the history of Greece till about 800 BC is a string of fairy tales, all about Theseus and Heracles and Oedipus and Minos and Perseus. Is a cabinet de fées, a collection of fairy tales. Shakespeare took them and put bits into them into King Lear and other plays. He could not have made them up himself, great as he was. Let ladies and gentlemen think of this when they sit down to write fairy tales, and have them nicely typed, and send them to Messrs. Longman and Company to be published. They think that to write a new fairy tale is easy work. They are mistaken. The thing is impossible. Nobody can write a new fairy tale. You can only mix up and dress up the old stories and put your characters into new dresses, as Miss Thackeray did so well in Five Old Friends. If any big girl of 14 reads this preface, let her insist on being presented with Five Old Friends. But the 365 authors who try to write new fairy tales are very tiresome. They always begin with a little boy or girl who goes out and meets the fairies of polyanthes and gardenias and apple blossoms, fruits and flowers and fruits and other winged things. These fairies try to be funny and fail, or they try to preach and succeed. Real fairies never preach or talk slang. At the end, the little boy or girl wakes up and finds that he has been dreaming. Such are the new fairy stories, but may be persevered from all the sort of them. I wonder if he's taking a dig at Elfrink Bomb. Very likely. It's about that time period. Our stories are almost all old, some from Ireland, before the island was as celebrated for her wrongs as for her verdure, some from Asia, made, I dare say, before the Aryan invasion, some from Moidart, Morar, and Andarmarchen, where the sea steams like great clear rivers and the saw-edged hills are blue, and men remember Prince Charlie. Some are from Portugal, where the golden fruits grow in the garden of Hesperides. and some are from wild Wales and were told at Arthur's court, and others come from the firesides by the kinsmen of the Welsh, the Bretons. There are also modern tales by a learned Scandinavian named Topilus. All of the stories were translated or adapted by Mrs. Lang, except the Jogi's Punishment and Moti, which were done by Major Campbell out of the Pushtu language, How Brave Walter Hunted Wolves, which with Little Lassie and the Raspberry Worm was done by Topilus and Miss Harding, and The Sea King's Gift by Miss Christie from the same author. It has been suggested to the editor that children and parents and guardians would like the Grey True Ghost Story book. I've honestly looked for this book and cannot find any record of it. He knows that the children would like them, and he would gladly give it to them, but about the taste of fond, anxious mothers and kind aunts, he is not quite so certain. Before he was 12, the editor knew true ghost stories enough to fill a volume. They were a pure joy till bedtime, but then, and later, were not wholly a source of unmixed pleasure. At the same time, the editor was not afraid of the dark, for he thought, if a ghost is here, we can't see him. But when older and better informed persons said that ghosts brought their own light with them, which is too true, then one's emotions were such as parents do not desire the young to endure. For this reason, the Grey True Ghost Story book is never likely to be illustrated by Mr. Ford. That is the second time Lang has mentioned that book. He mentioned it in the previous fairy book, and I've been trying to find anything on it that I can, and I cannot find it. But considering it had been late 1800s, I'm not sure how well it would have survived unless it became a series. Because I can find true ghost stories from that area, but I just can't find the Grey True Ghost Story book. In fact, he puts that in quotes in this commentary, means that is the actual working title of the book. But the Gutenberg Library doesn't even have it. Because I would really like to read that book. Anyway. This first story seems to be Irish. Nice. So our first story from the Lilac Fairy Book on this fabulous Friday night of fairy tales. The Shifty Lad. In the land of Erin there dwelt long ago a widow who had an only son. He was a clever boy, so she saved up enough money to send him to school, and as soon as he was old enough to apprentice him to any trade that he would choose. But when the time came, he said he would not be bound by any trade, and that he meant to be a thief. Now his mother was very sorrowful when she heard of this, but she knew quite well that if she tried to stop him, if she tried to stop his having his own way, he would only grow more determined to get it. Thank you for the hydrate and stretch. So all the answer she made was that the end of thieves was hanging at the bridge of Dublin, and then she left him alone, hoping that he was older than he might become more sensible. One day she was going to church to hear a sermon from a great preacher, and she begged the Shifty Lad, as the neighbors called him from the tricks he had played, to come with her. But he only laughed and declared that he did not like sermons, adding, "However, I will promise you this, that the first trade you hear named after you come out of the church stall be my trade for the rest of my life." These words gave little comfort to the poor woman, and her heart was lighter than before, as she bade him farewell. When the Shifty Lad thought that the hour had nearly come for his sermon to be over, he hid himself in some bushes in a little path that led straight to his mother's house, and as she would pass along, thinking of all the good things she had heard, a voice shouted close to her ear, "Robbery! Robbery! Robbery!" The suddenness of it all made her jump. The naughty boy had managed to change his voice so that she did not know it was for his, and he had concealed himself so well that she peered all about her and could see no one. As soon as she had turned the corner, the Shifty Lad came out, and by running very fast through the wood, he contrived to reach home before his mother, who found him stretched out comfortably before the fire. "Well, have you got any news to tell me?" he asked. "No, nothing, for I left the church at once and did not stop to speak to anyone." "Then no one has mentioned trade to you," he said in tones of disappointment. Yes, she said slowly. "At least, as I walked down the path, the voice cried out, 'Robbery, robbery, robbery!' But that was all." "And quite enough, too," answered the boy. "What did I tell you? That was going to be my trade." "Then your end will be hanging at the bridge of Dublin," said she. But there was no sleep for her that night, for she lay in the dark thinking about her son. "If he is to be a thief after all, he'd better be a good one. And who is there that can teach him?" the mother asked herself. But an idea came to her, and she arose early, before the sun was up, and set out for the home of the Black Rogue, or Gallows Bird, who was such a wonderful thief that, though all had been robbed by him, no one could catch him. "Good morning to you," said the mother as she reached the place where the Black Gallows Bird lived, when he was not away on his business. "My son has a fancy to learn your trade. Will you be kind enough to teach him?" "If he is clever, I don't mind trying," answered the Black Gallows Bird. "And, of course, if anyone can turn him into a first-rate thief, it is I. But if he is stupid, it is no use at all. I can't bear stupid people." "No, he isn't stupid," said the woman with a sigh. "So tonight after dark, I will send him to you." The Shifty Lad jumped for joy when his mother told him where she had been. "I will become the best thief in all of Erin," he cried, and paid no heed when his mother shook her head and murmured something about the bridge of Dublin. Every evening after dark, the Shifty Lad went to the home of the Black Gallows Bird, and many were the new tricks he had learned, and by he was allowed to go out with the bird and watch him work. And at last there came a day when his master thought that he had grown clever enough to help in a big robbery. "There's a rich farmer just up there on the hill who has just sold all his fat cattle for much money and has brought some lean ones which will cost him little. Now, it happens that, while he has received the money for the fat cattle, he has not yet paid the price for the thin ones, which he has in the cowhouse. Tomorrow he will go to the market with the money in hand, so tonight we must get at the chest. When all is quiet, we will hide in the loft." There was no moon, for it was the night of Halloween, and everyone was burning nuts and catching apples in a tub of water with their hands tied, or some other sort of silly games, till Shifty Lad grew quite tired of waiting for them to get to bed. The Black Gallows Bird, who was more accustomed to the business, tucked himself up on the hay and went to sleep, telling the boy to wake him when the merrymakers had departed. But the Shifty Lad, who could keep still no longer, crept down to the cowshed and loosened the heads of the cattle which were tied, and they began to kick each other and bellow, and made such a noise that the company in the farmhouse ran out to tie them up again. Then the Shifty Lad entered the room and picked up a big handful of nuts and returned to the loft, where the Black Rogue was still sleeping. At first the Shifty Lad shut his eyes too, but he very soon sat up, and taking a big needle and a thread from his pocket, he sewed the hem of the Black Gallows Bird's coat to a heavy piece of bullock's hide that was hanging in the back. By this time the cattle were all tied up again, but as people could not find their nuts, they sat around the fire and began to tell stories. I will crack a nut, said the Shifty Lad. No, you shall not, cried the Black Gallows Bird. They will hear you. I don't care, answered the Shifty Lad. I never spent Halloween yet without cracking a nut. And he cracked one. Someone's cracking nuts up there, said one of the merrymakers in the farmhouse. Come quickly, we will see who it is. He spoke loudly, and the Black Gallows Bird heard, and ran out of the loft, dragging the big leather hide after him, which Shifty Lad had sewed to his coat. He's stealing my hide, shouted the farmer, and they all darted after him, but he was too swift for them, and unless he managed to tear the hide from his coat, and then he flew like a hare till he reached his old hiding place. But all this took a long time, and meanwhile the Shifty Lad had got down from the loft, searched the house until he found the chest with the gold and silver in it, concealed behind a load of straw, and covered the loaves of bread and a great cheese. The Shifty Lad slung the money bags round his shoulders and took the bread and the cheese under his arm, then set back quietly to the Black Rogue's house. Here you are at last, you villain, cried his master in a great wrath, but I will be revenged to you. It's all right, replied the Shifty Lad calmly. I have brought what you wanted. And he laid the things he was carrying down on the ground. Ah, you are a better thief, said the Black Rogue's wife, and the Black Rogue added, yes, it's supposed to be a female voice. Ah, you are the better thief, said the Black Rogue's wife, and the Black Rogue added, yes, it is you who are the clever boy. And they divided the spoil, and the Black Gallows Bird had one half, and the Shifty Lad the other half. A few weeks after that, the Black Gallows Bird had news of a wedding that was to be held near the town, and the bridegroom had many friends, and everybody sent him a present. Now, a rich farmer who lived up near the moor thought nothing was so useful to a young couple when they first began to keep a fine house, was a fine sheep. So he bade his shepherd go off to the mountain where the flock were feeding, and bring him back the best he could find. And the shepherd chose out the largest and fattest of the sheep, and the one with the whitest fleece. Then he tied its feet together and put it out across his shoulder, for he had a long way to go. That day the Shifty Lad happened to be wandering over the moor, when he saw the man with the sheep on his shoulder walking along the road, which led past Black Rogue's house. The sheep was heavy, and the man was in no hurry, so he came slowly, and the boy knew that he himself could easily get back to the master before the shepherd was even in sight. I will wager, he cried. He pushed quickly through the bushes and hid in the cabin. I will wager that I will steal the sheep from that man that is coming before he passes here. Will you indeed? Said the Gallows Bird. I will wager you 100 silver pieces that you can do nothing of the sort. Well, I will try it anyway, replied the boy, and disappeared into the bushes. He ran fast until he entered the wood through which his shepherd must go, and then he stopped, taking off one of his shoes and smearing it with mud and set it in the path. When this was done, he slipped behind a rock and waited. Very soon the man came up, and seeing the shoe lying there, he stopped and looked at it. That is a good shoe, he said to himself, but very dirty. Still, if I had the fellow, I would at least be worth the trouble cleaning it up. So he threw the shoe down again and went on. The Shifty Lad smiled as he heard him, and picking up the shoe, he crept around the short way and laid the other shoe in the path. A few minutes after the shepherd arrived, and beheld the second shoe lying on the path. Why, that is a fellow to the dirty shoe, he exclaimed when he saw it. I will go back and pick up the other one, then I shall have a new pair of shoes. So he put the sheep on the grass and returned to fetch the shoe. Then the Shifty Lad put on his shoes, and picking up the sheep, carried it home. And the Black Rogue paid him the 100 marks for his wager. When the shepherd reached the farmhouse that night, he told his tale to his master, who scolded him for being stupid and careless, and bade him to go the next day to the mountain and fetch him a kid, and then he would send that as a wedding gift. But the Shifty Lad was on the lookout, and he hid himself in the wood, and the moment the man drew near with the kid, his shoulders began to bleat like a sheep, and no one, not even the sheep's own mother, could have told the difference. Why, it must be it's got its feet loose, and straight off, thought the man, and he put the kid on the grass and hurried off in the direction of the bleating. Then the boy ran back and picked up the kid, and took it to the black gallows bird. The shepherd could hardly believe his eyes when he returned from seeking the sheep and found that the kid had vanished. He was afraid to go home and tell the same tale he had told yesterday, so he searched through the wood and till night was nearly come. Then he felt there was no more help of it, so he must go home and confess to his master. Of course, the farmer was very angry at the second misfortune, but this time he told him to drive one of the big bulls from the mountain, and warned him that if he lost that, he would lose his place also. Again, the shifty lad who was on the watch perceived him pass by, and when he saw the man returning with the great bull, he cried to Black Robe, "Be quick and come to the robe. We'll try and get the bull also." "But how can we do that?" asked the Black Robe. "Oh, quite easily. You hide yourself out there and baa like a sheep, and I will go the other direction and bleat like the kid. It will be all right, I assure you." The shepherd was walking slowly, driving the bull before him, when he suddenly heard a loud baa amongst the bushes far away on one side of the path, then a feeble bleat answering it from the other side. "Why, it must be the sheep and the kid I lost," he said. "Yes, surely it must." And tying the bull hastily to the tree, he went off after the sheep and the kid, and searched the wood until he was tired. Of course, by the time he came back, the two thieves had driven the bull home and killed him for the meat, so the man was obliged to go to his master and confess that he had been tricked again. After this, the Black Road and Shifty Lad grew bolder and bolder, and stole great quantities of cattle and sold them, and grew quite rich. One day, when they were returning from the market with a large sum of money in their pockets, they passed a gallows erected on top of a hill. "I'd like to stop and look at that gallows," said the Shifty Lad. "I've never seen one so close. Some say that it might be yet the end of all thieves." There was no one in the sight, and they carefully examined every part of it. "I wonder how it feels to be hung," said the Shifty Lad. "I would like to know, in case they ever catch me. I'll try first, and then you can do so also." As he spoke, he fastened the loose cord around his neck, and when it was quite secure, he told the Black Robe to take the other end of the rope and to draw him up from the ground. "When I am tired of it, I will shake my legs. Then you must let me down," he said. The Black Robe drew up the rope, and in half a minute the Shifty Lad's legs began to shake, and he quickly let him down again. "You can't imagine what a funny feeling hanging gives you," murmured the Shifty Lad, who looked rather purple in the face, and spoke in an odd voice. "I don't think you have ever tried it, or you wouldn't have let me go up first. Why, it's the pleasantest thing I have ever done. I was shaking my legs from sheer delight, and if you had been there, you would have shaken your legs too." "Well, let me try, if it is so nice," answered the Black Robe. "But be sure you tie the knot securely, for I don't want to fall down and break my neck." "Oh, I will see to that," replied the Shifty Lad. "When you are tired, just whistle, and I will let you down." So the Black Robe was drawn up, and as soon as he was high as the rope would allow him to go, and the Shifty Lad called to him, "Don't forget to whistle when you want to come down, but if you are enjoying yourself as I did, shake your legs." And in a moment the Black Robe's legs began to shake and to kick, and the Shifty Lad stood below, watching him and laughing heartily. "Oh, how funny you are! If you could only see yourself! Oh, you are funny! But when you have had enough, whistle, and you shall be let down." And he rocked again with laughter. But no whistle came, and soon the legs ceased to shake and to kick, for the black gallows bird was dead, as the Shifty Lad intended he should be. Then he went back to the Black Robe's house and told her that the husband was dead and that he was ready to marry her if she liked. But the woman had been fond of the Black Robe, thief though he was, and she shrank away from Shifty Lad in horror, and set the people after him, and he had to fly to another part of the country where none knew of his doings. Perhaps, if the Shifty Lad's mother knew anything of all this, she may have thought that by the time her son might be tired of stealing and try to some real honest trade. But in reality, he loved the tricks and the danger, and life would have seemed very dull without them. So he went on just as before, and made friends whom he taught to be as wicked as himself, till they took to robbing the king's storehouses, and by the advice of the wise man the king sent out the soldiers to catch the band of thieves. For a long time they tried in vain to lay hands on them. The Shifty Lad was too clever for them all, and if they laid traps, he laid better ones. At last one night he stole upon some soldiers while they were asleep in the barn and killed them, and persuaded the villagers that if they did not kill the other soldiers before morning, they would certainly be killed themselves. Thus it happened that when the sun rose, not a single soldier was alive in the village. Of course, this news soon reached the king's ears, and he was very angry and summoned the wise men to take counsel with him. And this was the counsel of the wise man: that he should invite all the people in the countryside to a ball, and among them the bold and impudent thief would surely come, and would he be sure to ask the king's daughter to dance with him. "Oh, counsel is good," said the king, who made his feast and prepared his ball, and all the people in the countryside were present, and the Shifty Lad came with them. When everybody had eaten and drunk as much as they wanted and went into the ballroom, there was a great throng, and while they were passing through the doorway, the wise man, who had a bottle of black ointment hidden in his robes, placed a tiny dot on the cheek of the Shifty Lad near his ear. The Shifty Lad felt nothing, but as he approached the king's daughter to ask her to be his partner, he caught sight of the black dot in a silver mirror. Instantly he guessed who had put it there, and why, but he said nothing, and danced so beautifully that the princess was quite delighted with him. At the end of the dance he bowed low to his partner and left her, to mingle with the crowd that was filling the doorway. As he passed the wise man, he contrived not only to steal the bottle, but to place 2 black dots on his face and one of the faces of 20 other men. Then he slipped the bottle back into the wise man's robe. By and by he went to the king's daughter again and begged for the honor for another dance. She consented, and while he was stooping to tie the ribbons of his shoe to look out of her pockets another bottle, on which the wizard had given her, and put a black dot on his cheek. But she was not as skillful as the wise man, and the Shifty Lad felt her touch her fingers, so as soon as the dance was over he contrived to place a second black dot on the faces of 20 men, and 2 more on the wizard, after which he slipped the bottle into her pocket. At length the ball came to an end, and then the king ordered all the doors to be shut, and to search for a man with 2 black dots on his cheek. The chamberlain went among the guests, and soon found such a man. But just as he was going to arrest him and bring him before the king, his eye fell on another with the same mark, and another, until he had counted 20, besides the wise man, on whose face were found spots. Not knowing what to do, the chamberlain hurried back to his tale to the king, and immediately sent for the wise men, and then for his daughter. "The thief must have stolen your bottle," said the king to the wizard. "Oh, no, my lord, it is here," answered the wise man, holding it out. "Then he must have got yours," he cried, turning to his daughter. "Indeed, father, it is safe in my pocket," answered she, and taking it out as she spoke. They all 3 looked at each other and remained silent. "Well," said the king at last, "the man who has done this is cleverer than most men, and if he will make himself known to me, he shall marry the princess and govern half my kingdom while I am alive, and the whole of it when I am dead. Go and announce this to the ballroom," he added to the attendant, "and bring the fellow hither." So the attendant went to the ballroom, and did as the king had bidden him, when, to his surprise, not 1 man, but 20 stepped forward, all with black dots on their faces. "I am the person you want," they all exclaimed at once, and the attendant, as much bewildered as the chamberlain had been, desired them to follow him to the king's presence. But the question was too difficult for the king to decide, so he called together his council. For hours they talked, but to no purpose, and in the end they hit upon a plan which they might just as well have thought of at the beginning. This was the plan. A child was to be brought to the palace, and next to the king's daughter would give her an apple. Then the child was to take the apple and be led into a room where the 20 men with the black dots were sitting in a ring, and whoever the child gave the apple
That man should marry the king's daughter. Of course, said the king. It may not be the right man, after all, but then again it may be. Anyhow, it is the best we can do. The princess herself led the child into the room where the 20 men were now seated. She stood in the center of the ring for a moment, looking at one man after another, and then held out an apple to the Shifty Lad, who was twisting the shaving wood around his fingers, and had the mouthpiece of a bagpipe hanging from his neck. "You ought not to have anything what the others have got," said the chamberlain. So he accompanied the princess, and he bade the child to stand outside for a minute, while he took away the shaving and the mouthpiece, and made the Shifty Lad change his place. Then called the child in again, but the little girl knew him again and went straight to him with the apple. "This is the man whose child has chosen twice," said the chamberlain, sighing to the shifty man to kneel before the king. "It was quite fair. He tried it twice over." And in this way the Shifty Lad won the king's daughter, and they were married the next day. A few days later, the bride and bridegroom were taking a walk together and led down a path to a river. Over the river was a bridge. "What bridge does it And what bridge may this be?" asked the Shifty Lad, and the princess told him that this was the Bridge of Dublin. "Is it indeed?" cried he. "Oh, now, many a times my mother has told me that when I played a trick at my end, that I should be hanging on the Bridge of Dublin." "Oh, if you want to fulfill her prophecies," laughed the princess, "if only let me tie a handkerchief around your ankle, and I will hold you as you hang over the wall of the bridge." "That would be fine fun," he said, "but you are not strong enough to hold me up." "Oh, yes, I am," said the princess. "Just try." So at last he let her bind the handkerchief around his ankle and hang him over the wall, and they both laughed and jested at the strength of the princess. "Now pull me up again," called he. But as he spoke, a great cry arose from the palace that the palace was burning. The princess turned around with a start and let go of the handkerchief. The Shifty Lad fell and struck his head on a stone, and died in an instant. So his mother's prophecy had come true. Okay. That was an interesting story. Now, the ways he was stealing the livestock has been done in other stories, but I don't think, well, I'm going to try to read the next story. I may end up having to pause the ads for it, but it's a little bit shorter than this one, so it should be okay. Dark and ended with a death, Sith Lord's favorite. In the next story, The False Prince and the True. The king had just awakened from his midday sleep, for it was summer, and everyone rose early and rested from 12 to 3, as they do in hot countries. He had dressed himself in a cool, wide clothes, and was passing through the hall on his way to the council chamber, when a number of young nobles suddenly appeared before him, and one amongst them stepped forward and spoke. "Sire, this morning we were all playing tennis in the court, and the prince and his gentlemen were at the rest, when there broke out some dispute about the game. The prince lost his temper, and many insulting things to the other, who was playing against him, till at length the gentleman whom you see there struck him violently in the face, so that the blood ran from his nose and mouth. We were all horrified at the sight, that we should most likely have killed the man then and there, for daring lay his hands on the prince, had not his grandfather the duke stepped between them and commanded us to lay the affair before you." The king listened attentively to the story, and when it was ended, he spoke. "I suppose the prince had no arms with him, or else he would have used them?" "Yes, sire, he had arms. He always carries a dagger in his belt, but when he saw the blood pouring from his face, he went to a corner of the court and began to cry, which was the strangest thing of all." On hearing this, the king walked to the window and stood for a few minutes with his back to the room, where the company of young men remained silent. Then he came back, his face white and stern. "I tell you," he said, "and it is a solemn truth, that I would rather you had told me that the prince was dead, though he is my only son, than to know that he would suffer such an injury without attempting to avenge it. As for the gentleman who struck him, he will be brought before my judges and will plead his own cause, but I hardly think he can escape death after having assaulted the heir to the crown." The young man raised his hand as if to reply, but the king would not listen, and commanded the guards to put him under arrest, adding, however, that if the prisoner wished to visit any part of the city, he was at liberty to do so, properly guarded, and in 15 days he would be brought to the trial of the highest judge in the land. The young man left the king's presence surrounded by soldiers, and accompanied by many of his friends, for he was a great favorite. In their advice, he spent the 14 days they had remaining to him, going around to seek counsel from wise men of all sorts, as to how he might escape death. But no one could help him, for none could find any excuse for the blow he had given the prince. The 14th night had come, and in despair the prisoner went out to take his last walk through the city. He wandered on hardly knowing where he went, and his face was so white and desperate that none of his companions dared to speak to him. The sad little procession had passed some hours in this manner, when, near the gate of the monastery, an old woman appeared around the corner, and suddenly stood before the young man. She was bent almost double, and so wizened and wrinkled that she looked at least 90. Only her eyes were bright and quick as those of a girl. "Sir," she said, "I know what has happened to you, and how you are seeking if any wise can save your life. But there are none that can answer that question save only myself, if you will promise to do as I ask." At her words, the prisoner felt as if a load had been all at once rolled off of him. "Oh, save me! I will do anything!" he cried. "It is so hard to leave the world and go out into darkness." "You will not need to do that," answered the old woman. "You have only got to marry me, and soon you will be free." "Marry you!" exclaimed he. But I'm not yet 20, and why, you must be 100 at least. Oh no, it is quite impossible." He spoke without thinking, but the flash of anger which darted from her eyes made him feel uncomfortable. However, all she said was, "As you like, since you reject me, let the crows have you," and hurried away down the street. Left to himself, the full horror of his coming death rushed upon the young man, and he understood that he had thrown away his sole chance of life. Well, if he must, he must, he said to himself, and he began to run as fast as he could after the old crone, who by this time could scarcely be seen, even in the moonlight. Who would have believed a woman past 90 could walk at such a speed? It seemed more like flying. They have never seen my grandmother clearly. But at length, breathless and exhausted, he reached her side, and gasped out, "Madam, pardon me for my hasty words just now. I was wrong, and will thankfully accept the offer you made me." "Ah, I thought you would come to your senses," answered she, in a rather odd voice. "We have no time to lose. Follow me at once." And they went on silently and swiftly till they stopped at a door of a small house in which the priest lived. Before him, the old woman bade the prisoner swear that she should be his wife, and this he did in the presence of a witness. Then, begging the priest and the guards to leave him alone for a little, she told the old man what he was to do, and when the next morning he was brought before the king and the judges. The hall was full to overflowing when the prisoner entered it, and marveled at the brightness of his face. The king inquired if he had any excuse to plead for the high treason he had committed by striking one of the heirs to the throne, and if so, be quick in setting it forth. In a low bow, the youth made his answer in a clear voice. "O my lord and gracious king, and you, nobles and wise men of the land, I leave my cause without fear in your hands, knowing that you will listen and judge rightly, and that you will suffer me to speak to the end, before you give judgment. For 4 years you, O king, have been married to a queen, and yet have no children, which grieved you greatly. The queen saw this, and likewise that your love was going from her, and thought day and night of some plan that might put an end to this evil. At length, when you were away at fighting in distant countries, she decided she would do, and adopted in secret a baby of a poor quarryman, sending a messenger to you that you had a son. No one suspected the truth except a priest to whom the woman confessed the truth, and in a few weeks she fell ill and died, leaving the baby to be brought up as become a prince. And now, if your highness will permit me, I will speak of myself.
What you've already told me, answered the king, is so strange that I cannot imagine what more there is to tell. But go on with your story.
One day, shortly after the death of the queen, continued the young man, your highness was hunting, and outstripped all of your attendants while chasing a deer. You were in part of a country which you did not know, and seeing an orchard all pink and white with apple blossoms, and a girl tossing a ball in one corner, you went up to ask her your way. But when she turned to answer you, you were so struck with her beauty that all else fell from your mind. Again and again you rode back to see her, and at length persuaded her to marry you. She only thought you a poor knight, and agreed that, as you wished, the marriage should be kept secret. After the ceremony, you gave her 3 rings and a charm with a cross on it, and then put her in a cottage in the forest, thinking to hide the matter securely. For some months you visited the cottage every week, but a rebellion broke out in a distant part of the kingdom and called for your presence. When you rode up to the cottage, it was empty, and none could inform you where your bride had gone. That, sire, I can tell you now. And the young man paused and looked at the king, who colored deeply. She went back to her father, the old duke, once your chamberlain, and the cross on her breast revealed at once who you were. Fierce was his anger that when he heard his daughter's tale, he vowed he would hide her safely from you, till that day that you would claim her publicly as your queen. By and by, I was born and brought up by the grandfather in one of the great houses. Here are the rings you gave my mother, and here is the cross, and these will prove that I am your son or not. As he spoke, the young man laid the jewels at the feet of the king, and the nobles and the judges pressed around to examine them. The king alone did not move from his seat, for he had forgotten he was in the Hall of Justice and all about him, and only saw the apple orchard, as it was 20 years ago, and the beautiful girl playing at ball. A sudden silence around him made him look up, and he found the eyes of the assembly fixed on him.
It is true. It is he who is my son, and not the other, he said with an effort. And let every man present swear to acknowledge him as king after my death.
Therefore, one by one they all knelt before him and took the oath, and a message was sent to the false prince, forbidding him ever again from appearing at court, though a handsome pension was granted him. At last the ceremony was over, and the king, signing to his newly found son to follow him, he rose and went into another room.
Tell me how you knew all that,
he said, throwing himself into a carved chair filled with crimson cushions, and the prince told of his meeting with the old woman who had brought him the jewels from his mother, and how he had sworn before a priest to marry her, though he did not want to, on account of the difference of their ages. And besides, he would rather receive a bride chosen by the king himself. But the king frowned and answered sharply,
You swore to marry her if she saved your life, and come what may, you must fulfill your promise.
Then, striking a silver shield that hung close by, he said to the equerry who appeared immediately,
Go and seek the priest who lives near the door of the prison, and ask him where you can find the old woman who visited him last night, and when you have found her, bring her to the palace.
It took some time to discover the whereabouts of the old woman, but at length it was accomplished. When she arrived at the palace with the equerry, she was received with royal honors, and became the bride of the prince. The guards looked at each other with astonished eyes as the wizened creature, bowed with age, passed between their lines. But they were more still amazed at the lightness of her step as she skipped the steps to the great door before which the king was standing, with the prince at his side. If they both felt a shock of appearance, the old lady did not show. If they both felt a shock at the appearance of the aged lady, they did not show it, and the king, with a grave bow, took her hand and led her to the chapel, where a bishop was waiting to perform the marriage ceremony. For the next few weeks, little was seen of the prince, who spent all his days in hunting and trying to forget the old wife at home. As for the princess, she troubled no one. No one troubled himself about her, and she passed her days alone in her apartments, for she had absolutely declined the services of the ladies in waiting whom the king had appointed her. One night, after the prince returned after a longer chase than normal, he was so tired that he went straight up to bed. Suddenly he was awakened by a strange noise in the room, and suspecting that a robber might have stolen in, he jumped out of bed and seized the sword, which lay ready at his hand. Then he perceived that the noise proceeded from the next room, which belonged to the princess, and was lighted by a burning torch. Creeping softly to the door, he peeped through, and beheld her lying quietly, with a crown of gold and pearls upon her head. Her wrinkles all gone, and her face, which was whiter than snow, was as fresh as that of a girl of 14. Could that really be his wife, that beautiful, beautiful creature? The prince was still gazing in surprise when the lady opened her eyes and smiled at him. "Yes, I really am your wife," she said, if she had guessed his thoughts. "And the enchantment is ended. Now I must tell you who I am, and what befell to me to cause me the shape of an old woman. The King of Granada is my father, and I was born in the palace which overlooks the plain of the Vega. I was only a few months old when a wicked fairy who had a spite against my parents cast a spell over me, bending my back and wrinkling my skin till I looked as if I was 100 years old, and making me such an object of disgust to everyone that at length the king ordered my nurse to take me away from the place. She was the only person who cared about me, and we lived together in this country on a small pension allowed by the king. When I was about 3 years old, a man arrived at our house and begged my nurse to let him come in and rest, and he would talk with them, as he could walk no more. She saw that he was very ill, and put him to bed, and took such care of him that by and by he was as strong as ever. In gratitude for her goodness to him, he told her that he was a wizard, and would give her anything she chose to ask for, except life or death. So she answered that she longed for most was to see that my wrinkled skin should disappear, and that I should regain my beauty with which I was born. To this he replied that as my misfortune resulted from a spell, this was rather difficult, but he would do his best, and at any rate could promise that before my 15th birthday that I should be freed from this enchantment, if I could get a man who would swear to marry me as I was. As you may suppose, this was not easy, as my ugliness was such that no one could look at me for a second time. My nurse and I were almost in despair, as my 15th birthday was drawing near, and I had never so much as spoken to a man. At last we received a visit from the wizard who told us what had happened at court, and your story, bidding me to put myself in your way when you had lost all hope, and offer to save you if you would consent to marry me. That is my history. And now you must beg the king to send messengers to once Granada and inform my father of our marriage. And I think, she added with a smile, that he will not refuse us blessing.
Yay!
And now I guess we're going to have to go to ads. It didn't give me any notice, though. So I will see everyone in a few. Welcome back. Okay, I don't hear my fan. I have to get warm enough for me to have to turn on my fan next to my desk. I don't want it to be hot yet. Anyway. 2 stories about princes. That's pretty good for this channel. Normally it's about princesses. That's princes. Anyway. Let's see. Well, this is another one from Major Campbell. So our next story for this fabulous Friday night of fairy tales. The Yogi's Punishment. Once upon a time there came to the ancient city of Rahamabad a yogi of holy appearance who took up his abode under a tree outside the city, where he would sit for days at a time, fasting from food and drink, motionless except for his fingers that turned restlessly in a string of beads. The fame of such holiness was soon spread, and daily the citizens would flock to see him, eager to get his blessing, to watch his devotions, or to hear his teaching, if he were in the mood to speak. Very soon the Raja himself heard of the yogi, and began regularly to visit him to seek counsel, and to ask his prayers that son might be vouchsafed for him. Days passed, and at last the Raja became so possessed with the thought of the holy man that he determined, if possible, to try to get him all to himself. So he built in the neighborhood a little shrine, with a room or two added to it, and a small courtyard closely walled up, and when all was ready, he sought the yogi to occupy it, and to receive no other visitors except himself and his queen, and such pupils as the yogi might choose, who would hand down his teaching. To this the yogi consented, and thus he lived for some time upon the king's bounty, whilst the fame of his godliness grew day by day. Now, all through the Raja of Rahamabad had no son. He possessed a daughter, who, as she grew up, became the most beautiful creature that eye ever rested upon. Her father had long before betrothed her to the son of the neighboring Raja in Dilaram, but as yet she had not been married to him, and lived the quiet life proper to a maiden of her beauty and position. The princess had of course heard of the holy man, and of his miracles and his fasting, and she was filled with curiosity to see him or to speak to him. But this was difficult, since she was not allowed to go out except in the palace grounds, and then was always closely guarded. However, at length she found an opportunity, and made her way one evening alone to the hermit's shrine. Unhappily, the hermit was not really as holy as he seemed, for no sooner did he see the princess than he fell in love with her wonderful beauty, and began to plot in his heart how he could win her for his wife. But the maiden was not only beautiful, she was also quite shrewd, and as soon as she read in the glance of the yogi that love filled his soul, she sprang to her feet and gathered her veil about her and ran from the place as fast as she could. The yogi tried to follow, but he was no match for her, so beside himself with rage at finding he could not overtake her, he flung at her a lance, which wounded her in the leg. The brave princess stooped for a second to pluck the lance out of the wound, and then she ran on until she found herself safe at home again. There she bathed and bound up the wound secretly, and told no one how naughty she had been, for she knew that her father would punish her severely. The next day, when the king went to visit the yogi, the holy man would neither speak nor look at him. "What is the matter?" asked the king. "Won't you speak to me today?" "I have nothing to say to you that you would care to hear," answered the yogi. "Why?" said the king. "Surely you know that I value all that you say, whatever it may be." But still the yogi sat with his face turned away, and the more the king pressed him, the more silent and mysterious he became. At last, after much persuasion, he said, "Let me tell you, then, that there is in this city a creature which, if you do not put an end to it, will kill every single person in the place." Thank you for the 1300.
The king, who was easily frightened, grew pale. "What?" he gasped. "What is this dreadful thing? How am I to know it and to catch it? Only counsel me and help me, and I will do all that you advise."
Ah, replied the Yogi, it is indeed dreadful. It is in the shape of a beautiful girl, but it is really an evil spirit. Last evening it came to visit me, and when I looked upon its beauty faded into hideousness, and its teeth became horrid fangs, and its eyes gleamed like coals of fire. Great claws sprang from its slender fingers, and were I not what I am, it might have consumed me.
The king could hardly speak from alarm, but at last he said, "How am I to distinguish this awful thing when I see it?"
Search, said the Yogi, for a lovely girl with a lance wound in her leg, and when she is found, secure her safely and come to me and tell me, and I will advise you what to do next.
Away hurried the king, and as soon as his soldiers were scouring the country for a girl with a lance wound in her leg. For 2 days the search went on, and then it was somehow discovered that the only person with a lance wound in his leg was the princess herself. The king, greatly agitated, went off to tell the Yogi and to assure him that there must be some mistake. But of course the Yogi was prepared for this, and had his answer ready.
She is not really your daughter, who was stolen away at her birth, but an evil spirit that has taken her form, he said solemnly. You can do what you like, but if you don't take this advice, she will kill you all.
And so solemn he appeared, and so unshaken in his confidence, that the king's wisdom was blinded, and he declared that he would do whatever the Yogi advised, and believe whatever he said. So the Yogi directed him to send him secretly 2 carpenters, and when they arrived he set them to make a great chest, so cunningly jointed and put together that neither air nor water could penetrate it. Then and there the chest was made, and when it was ready, the Yogi bade the king to bring the princess by night, and they too thrust the little maiden into the chest, and fastened it down with long nails, and carried it between them to the river, and pushed it out into the stream. As soon as the Yogi got back from his deed, he called 2 of his pupils, and pretended that it had been revealed to him that there should be found floating in a river a chest with something of great price within it, and he bade them to go and watch for it at such a place far down the stream. And when the chest came slowly along, bobbing and turning in the tide, they were to seize it and swiftly bring it to him, for he was now determined to put the princess to death himself. The pupils set off at once, and wondering what the strangeness of this errand, and still more at the holiness of the Yogi, to which secrets were revealed. It happened that, at the next morning at dawn, the gallant young prince of Dilaram was hunting on the banks of the river, with a follow of great wazirs, attendants, and huntsmen. As he rode, he saw floating in the river a large chest, which came slowly along, bobbing and turning in its tide. Raising himself in the saddle, he gave an order, and 6 men plunged into the water and drew the chest out onto the river bank, where everyone crowded around to see what it could contain. The prince was certainly not the least curious among them, but he was cautious, young man, and as he prepared to open the chest himself, he bade all stand back, and a few of those draw swords, so as to be prepared in case the chest should hold some evil beast or a giant. When all were ready and expectant, the prince, with his dagger, forced open the lid and flung it back, and there lay, living and breathing, the most lovely maiden he had ever seen in his life. Although she was half stifled from her confinement in the chest, the princess speedily revived, and when she was able to sit up, the prince began to question her as to who she was and how she came to be shut up in the chest that sat afloat upon the river.
and she, blushing and trembling to find herself in the presence of so many strangers, told him that she was a princess of Rahamabad, and that she had been put into the chest by her own father. When he on his part told her that he was a prince of Dowaram, the astonishment of the young people was unbounded to find that they, who had been betrothed without ever seeing one another, should actually meet for the first time under such strange circumstances. In fact, the prince was so moved by her beauty and modest ways that he called up his viziers and commanded they be married at once to this lovely lady who had completely won his heart. And married they were just then and there upon the river bank, and went home to the prince's palace, where, when the story was told, they were welcomed by the old Rajah, the prince's father, and the remainder of the day was given over to feasting and rejoicing. But when the banquet was over, the bride told her husband that now, on the threshold of their married life, she had more to relate of her adventures than she had given the opportunity to tell as yet, and then, without hiding anything, she informed him of all that had happened to her from the time she had stolen out to visit the wicked Jogi. In the morning, the prince called his chief vizier and ordered him to shut up the case in which the princess had been found, with a great monkey that was chained live upon the palace, and to take the chest back to the river and set it afloat once more, and to watch what became of it. So the monkey was caught and put into the chest, and some of the prince's servants took it down to the river and pushed it into the water. Then they followed secretly a long way to see what became of it. Meanwhile, the Yogi's two pupils watched and waited for the chest until they were nearly tired of watching, and were beginning to wonder whether the Yogi was right after all. When on the second day, they spied a great chest floating along the river, slowly bobbing and turning on the tide, and instantly a great joy of exultation seized them, for they thought that there was indeed further proof of the wonderful wisdom of their master. With some difficulty, they secured the chest and carried it back as swiftly and secretly as possible to the Yogi's house. As soon as they brought in the chest, the Yogi, who had been getting very cross and impatient, told them to put it down and to go outside whilst he opened the magic chest. "And even if you hear cries and shouts, however alarming, you must not enter here," said the Yogi, and walking over to the closet where lay a silken cord that was to strangle the princess. And the two pupils did as they were told, and went outside, and closed all the doors. Presently they heard a great outcry within, and the Yogi's voice crying aloud for help, but they dared not enter, for they had been told not to do. They had been told that whatever the noise, they must not come in. So they sat outside, and waited and wondering, and at last they all grew still and quiet, and remained for so long a time that they determined to enter to see if all was well. No sooner had they opened the door leading into the courtyard than they were nearly upset by a huge monkey that came leaping straight to the doorway and escaped past them into the open fields. Then they stepped into the room, where they saw the Yogi's body lying, torn to pieces, on the threshold of his dwelling. Very soon the story spread as stories will, and reached the ears of the princess and her husband, and when she knew that her enemy was dead, she made her peace with her father. Okay. Not so holy man being torn to bits by a monkey. Good way to end the story. See, how is this next one? The next one is 7 pages. The one after that is 4. Ecuador. Death and chaos and dismembering of villains. Our next possibly wonderful story for this fabulous Friday Night of Fairy Tales. The Heart of a Monkey. A long time ago, a little town made up a collection of low huts stood in a tiny green valley at the foot of a cliff. Of course, the peoples had taken great care to take their Of course, the people had taken great care to build their houses out of reach of the highest tide, which might have driven on shore by the west wind. But on the very edge of the town there had sprung up a tree so large that half its boughs hung over the huts, and the other half over the deep sea right under the cliff, where sharks loved to come and splash in the clear water. The branches of the tree itself were laden with fruit, and every day at sunrise a big gray monkey might have been seen on the topmost branches having his breakfast, and chattering to himself with delight. After he had eaten all the fruit on the town side of the tree, the monkey swung himself along the branches to the part which hung over the water. While he was looking out for a nice shady place where he might perch comfortably, he noticed a shark watching him from below with greedy eyes. "Can I do anything for you, my friend?" asked the monkey politely. "Oh, if you would throw me down some of those delicious things, I would be so grateful," answered the shark. "After you have lived on fish for 50 years, you begin to feel you would like a change, and I'm so very, very tired of the taste of salt." "Well, I don't like salt myself," said the monkey. "So if you open your mouth, I will throw this beautiful juicy curio into it." And as he spoke, he pulled one off the branch just above his head. But it was not so easy to hit the shark's mouth as he had supposed, even when the creature had turned on his back, and the first curio only struck one of his teeth and rolled into the water. However, the second time the monkey had better luck, and the fruit fell right in. "Oh, how good!" cried the shark. "Send me another, please." And the monkey grew tired of picking the curios long before the shark was tired of eating them. It was getting late, and I must be getting... "It is getting late, and I must be getting home to my children," he said at length. "But if you are here at the same time tomorrow, I will give you another treat." Thank you," said the shark, showing all his great ugly teeth as he grinned with delight. "You can't guess how happy you have made me." And he swam away into the shadow, hoping to sleep away until the time the monkey came again. For a few weeks, the shark and the monkey breakfasted together, and it was such a wonder that the tree had any fruit left for them. They became fast friends and told each other about their homes and their children, and how to teach them how they thought they ought to know. By and by, the monkey became rather discontented with his green house and a grove of palms beyond the town, and longed to see the strange things under the sea which he had heard from the shark. The shark perceived this very clearly, and described greater marvels. The monkey had listened and grew more and more gloomy. Matters were in this state when one day the shark said, "I really hardly know how to thank you for all your kindness to me during these weeks. Here I have nothing of my own to offer you, but if you would only consent to come home with me, how gladly I would give you anything that might happen to take your fancy." "I should like nothing better," cried the monkey, his teeth chattering, as they always did when he was pleased. "But how can I get there? Not by water. It makes me ill to think of it." "Oh, don't let that trouble you," replied the shark. "You only have to sit on my back, and I will undertake that not a drop of water will touch you." So it was arranged. Directly after breakfast the next morning, the shark swam close up under the tree, and the monkey dropped neatly on his back, without even a splash. After a few minutes, for at first he felt a little frightened for the strange position, the monkey began to enjoy himself vastly, asked the shark 1,000 questions about the fish and the seaweeds and the oddly shaped things that floated past them, and as the shark always gave him some sort of answer, the monkey never guessed that many of the objects he saw were new to his guide as himself. The sun had risen and set 6 times when the shark suddenly said, "My friend, we have now performed half our journey, and it is time I should tell you something." "What is it?" asked the monkey. "Nothing unpleasant, I hope, for you sound rather grave." "Oh, no, nothing at all.
It is only shortly before we left I heard that a sultan of my country is very ill, and the only cure for him is a monkey's heart.
Poor man, I feel very sorry for him, replied the monkey. But you are not unwise to tell me that we started.
What do you mean? Asked the shark, but the monkey, who now understood the whole plot, did not answer at once, for he was considering what he should say. Why are you so silent? Inquired the shark again.
I was thinking it was a pity that you did not tell me while I was still on land. Then I could have brought my heart with me.
Your heart? Why, isn't your heart here? Said the shark with a puzzled expression.
Oh, no, of course not. It is possible that you don't know that when we leave home we always hang up our hearts on trees to prevent their getting trounced with them. However, perhaps you won't believe that, and will just think that I've invented it because I'm afraid. So let us go in your country as fast as we can, and when we arrive you can look for my heart, and if you can find it, you can kill me.
The monkey spoke in such a calm and different way that the shark was quite deceived, but began to wish he had not been in such a hurry. But there is no use of going if your heart is not with you, he said at last. We had better go back to the town, and then you can fetch it. Of course, this is just what the monkey wanted, but he was careful not to seem too pleased.
Well, I don't know, he remarked carelessly. It is such a long way, and you may be right.
I'm sure I am, said the shark, and I will swim as quickly as I can. And so he did, and in 3 days they caught sight of the kiri tree hanging over the water. With a sigh of relief, the monkey caught hold of the nearest branch and swung himself up.
Wait for me here, he called out to the shark. I am so hungry I must have a little breakfast, and then I will go and look for my heart.
And he went further and further up into the branches so that the shark could not see him. Then he curled himself up and went to sleep. Are you there? Cried the shark, who was soon tired of swimming under the cliff and was in haste to be gone. The monkey awoke with a start, but did not answer. Are you there? Cried the shark again, louder than before, but in a very cross voice.
Oh, yes, I am here, replied the monkey, but I wish you had not wakened me. I am having such a nice nap.
Have you got it? Asked the shark. It is time we are going.
Going where? Inquired the monkey.
Why, to my country, of course, with your heart. You can't have forgotten.
My dear friend, answered the monkey with a chuckle, I think you must be going a little mad. Do you take me for a washerman's monkey? Washerman's donkey?
Don't talk nonsense, exclaimed the shark, who did not like being laughed at. What do you mean about a washerman's donkey? And I wish you would be quick, or we are too late to save the Sultan.
Did you really never hear of the washerman's donkey? Asked the monkey, who was enjoying himself immensely. Why, he is a beast who has no heart, and as I am not feeling very well, and am afraid to start when the sun is so high, lest I should get a sunstroke, if you like, I will come a little nearer and tell you the story.
Very well, said the shark sulkily. If you won't come, I suppose I may as well listen to what is doing. So the monkey began.
A washerman once lived in a great forest on the other side of town, and he had a donkey to keep him company and to carry him wherever he wanted to go. For a time they got on very well, but by and by the monkey grew lazy and ungrateful to his master's kindness, and ran several miles into the heart of the forest, where she did nothing but eat and eat and eat, till she grew so fat she could hardly move. One day, when she was tasting quite a new kind of grass and wondering if it was good, and what she had for dinner the day before, a hare happened to pass by. Well, what is that fat creature? She thought, and turned out the path and told the news to a lion who was a friend of hers. Now the lion had been very ill and was not strong enough to go hunting for himself, and when the hare came by and told him there was a very fat donkey that was to be found only a few yards off, tears of disappointment and weakness filled his eyes. "Well, what is the good of telling me that?" he asked in a weepy voice. "You know I cannot even walk as far as that palm."
Well, never mind, answered the hare briskly. If you can't go to your dinner shall come to you. And nodding farewell to the lion, she went back to the donkey.
Yes, she was a fat ass.
Good morning, said she, bowing politely to the donkey, who lifted her head in surprise. Excuse my interrupting you, but I have come to very important business. Indeed, answered the donkey. It is most kind of you to take the trouble. May I inquire what the business is? Certainly, replied the hare. It is my friend the lion who has heard so much of your charms and good qualities that he has sent me to beg you that you will come to give him your paw in marriage. He regrets deeply that he is unable to make the request in person, but he has been ill and so weak to move. Poor fellow, how sad, said the donkey. But you must tell him that I feel honored by his proposal, and I will gladly consent to be queen of the beasts. Will you not come and tell him yourself? Asked the hare. Side by side they went down the road which led to the lion's house. It took a long while, for the donkey was so fat from eating that she could only walk very slowly, and the hare, who could have run the distance in about 5 minutes, was obliged to creep along until she almost dropped with fatigue at not being able to go at her own pace. When at last they arrived at the lion was sitting at the entrance, looking very pale and thin. The donkey suddenly grew very shy and hung her head, but the lion put on his best manners and invited both visitors to come in and make themselves comfortable. Very soon the hare got up and said, Well, I have a number of engagement, and I will leave you to make acquaintance with your future husband, and then winking to the lion, she bounded away. The donkey expected that as soon as they were left alone, the lion would begin to speak of their marriage, where they should live, but he said nothing but looked up. To her surprise and terror, she saw him crouching in a corner, his eyes glaring with a red light, and with a loud roar he sprang towards her. But in a moment the donkey had time to prepare herself, and jumping on one side, dealt the lion such a hard kick that he shrieked with pain. Again and again he struck at her with his claws, but the donkey could bite too, and was as well as the lion, who was very weak in his illness. And at last the well-planted kick knocked him right over, and he rolled on the floor, groaning in pain. The donkey did not wait for him to get up, and ran away as fast as she could, and was lost in the forest. Now the hare, who knew quite well what would happen, had not gone to do her business, but hid herself in the bushes behind the cave, where she could quite hear the loud sounds of battle. When all was quiet again, she crept up quietly and stole around the corner. Well, lion, have you killed her? Asked she, running swiftly up to the path. Killed her indeed, answered the lion sulkily. It is she who has nearly killed me. I never knew a donkey could kick like that, though I would take care to carry away a few marks with my claws. Fancy me! Dear me! Fancy such a great fat creature being able to fight, cried the hare. But don't vex yourself, just lie still, and your wounds will soon heal. And she bade her friend goodbye and returned to her family. 2 or 3 weeks passed, and the only bare places the donkey showed back up in the lion's claws had been, while on his side the lion had recovered from his illness and was now as strong as ever. He was beginning to think that it was almost time for him to begin hunting again, and one morning a rustle was heard in the creepers outside, and the hare's head peeped through. There is no need to ask how you are, she said. Still, you mustn't overtire yourself, you know. Shall I go and bring you your dinner? If you bring me that donkey, I will tear it in two, cried the lion savagely, and the hare laughed and nodded and went on her errand. This time the donkey was much further than before, and it took longer to find her. At last the hare caught sight of the 4 hooves in the air and ran towards him. The donkey was laying in a soft, cool bed of moss near a stream, rolling herself backwards and forwards with pleasure. Good morning, said the hare politely, and the donkey slowly got to her legs and looked to see who her visitor was. Oh, it is you, is it? She exclaimed. Come and have a chat. What news have you got? I mustn't say, answered the hare, but I promised the lion to beg you to pay him a visit, as he is not well enough to call on you. Well, I don't know, replied the donkey gloomily. The last time he went and scratched me very badly, and I really was quite afraid. He was only trying to kiss you, said the hare, and you bit him, and of course he made him cross. If I were to assume of that, hesitated the donkey. Well, you may be quite sure, laughed the hare. I have a large acquaintance among lions, but let us be quick. And rather unwillingly, the donkey set out. The lion saw them coming and hid himself behind a large tree. As the donkey went past, followed by the hare, he sprang out, and with one blow of his paw he stretched the poor creature dead before him. "Take this meat and skin it and roast it," he said to the hare, "but my appetite is not as good as it was, and the only part I want for myself is the heart. The rest you can either eat for yourself or give away to your friends." "Thank you," replied the hare, balancing the donkey on her back as well as she was able to, and though the legs trailed along behind her, she managed to drag it into an open space some distance off, where she made a fire and roasted it. As soon as it was cooked, the hare took out her heart, and just as she finished eating it, when the lion, who was tired of waiting, came up. "I'm hungry," he said. "Bring me the creature's heart. It is just what I want for supper." "But there is no heart," answered the hare, looking up to the lion with a puzzled face. "What nonsense," said the lion. "As if every beast has got a heart. What do you mean?" "This is Washerman's donkey," replied the hare gravely. "Well, what is that supposed to be?" "Oh, fie!" exclaimed the hare. "You lie near a grown-up person and ask me questions like that? If the donkey had had a heart, she would have been here now. Well, the first time she came, you knew she was trying to kill her and ran away, but she came back a second time. Well, if she had had a heart, she would have come back a second time? Now, would she?" And the lion answered slowly, "No, she would not." "So you think I'm a washerman's donkey?" said the monkey to the shark, when the story was ended. "You are not wrong. I am not. As the sun is... You are wrong. I am not. And as the sun is setting low in the sky, it is time that you begin your homeward journey. You will have a nice cool voyage, and I hope you will find the Sultan better. Farewell." And the monkey disappeared among the tree and branches and was gone. Yes. Her ass was definitely toasted. Ugh. "I didn't think I'd have to tell an entire story like a monkey. But that kind of stuff tends to happen." Let's see. The next story is how long? The next story is only 4 pages. So, it will likely be the last story for tonight. The Fairy Nurse. There was once a little farmer and his wife living near Coolgarrow. They had 3 children, and my story happened to the youngest as a baby. The wife was a good wife enough, but her mind was all her family and her farm, and she hardly ever went without her knees falling asleep, and she thought that the time spent in the chapel was twice as long as it need be. So, friends, she let her man and her 2 children go before her one day to Mass, while she called to consult a ferryman about the disorder of one of her cows. She was late at the chapel, and was very sorry the day after, for her husband was in grief about it, and she was very fond of him. Late that night, he awakened by the cries of the children calling out, "Mother! Mother!" When he sat up and rubbed his eyes, there was no wife by his side, and when he asked the little ones what had become of their mother, they said they saw the room full of little nice men and women dressed in white and green and red, and their mother in the middle of them, going out by the door as if she was walking in her sleep. Out he ran and searched everywhere around the house, but neither tale nor tidings did he find of her for many days. Well, the poor man was miserable enough, for he was fond of his woman as she was of him. It used to bring salt tears down his cheeks to see his poor children neglected and dirty, as they often were, and they'd been bad enough only for a kind neighbor that used to look in when she could spare time. The infant was away with a nurse. About 6 weeks after, just as he was going out to his work in one of his morning, a neighbor that used to mind women when they were ill came up to him and kept step by step with him in the field, and this is what she told him. Just as I was falling asleep last night, I heard a horse's tramp on the grass and a knock at the door. And there, when I came out, was a fine-looking dark man mounted on a black horse, and he told me to get ready with all haste, for a lady was in great want of me. As soon as I put my cloak and things, he took me by the hand, and I was sitting behind him before I felt myself stirring. "Where are we going, sir?" says I. "You'll soon know," he says, and he drew his fingers across my eyes, and not a ray could I see. I kept a tight grip of him, and I little knew whether he was going backwards or forwards, or how long we were about it, till my hands was taken again, and I felt the ground under me. The fingers went away across my other eyes, and there we were before a castle door, and then we went through a big hall and great rooms, all painted with fine green colors, with red and gold bands and ornaments, and the finest carpets and chairs and tables and window curtains, and grand ladies and gentlemen walking about. At last we came to a bedroom, with a beautiful lady in bed, with a fine bouncing boy beside her. The lady clapped her hands, and in came the dark man, and he kissed the bear and the baby, and praised me, gave me a bottle of green ointment to rub on the child all over. Well, the child I rubbed, and sure enough, but my right eye began to smart. When I put my finger up to give it a rub, and when I stared, for never in the life of me I was so frightened. The beautiful room was a rough, big cave, and water oozing over the edges of the stones and through the clay, and the lady and the lord and children wise and bitterly poverty old creatures, nothing but skin and bone, and the rich dresses were old rags. I didn't let on that I found any difference. After a bit, says the dark man, "Go before me and to the hall door. I shall be with you in a few moments, and see you home safe." Well, just as I turned out to the outside cave, who should I see walking near the door but poor Molly? She looked around all terrified, and says to me in a whisper, "I'm brought here to nurse a child of the king and queen of the fairies. There is one chance of saving me. All the court will pass the cross near Temple Shabu on Friday night, on a visit from the fairies of Old Ross. If John can catch me by the hand or cloak when I ride by, and has the courage not to let go his grip, I'll be safe. Here's the king. Don't open your mouth to answer. I saw what happened with the ointment." The dark man didn't once cast his eye towards Molly, and he seemed to have no suspicion of me. When we came out, looked at me, and where do you think we were but the dyke of the Rath of Cormorant? I was on the horse again, which was nothing but a big ragweed, and I was in dread every minute I'd fall off, but nothing happened till I found myself in my own cabin. The king slipped 5 guineas into my hand as soon as I was on the ground, and thanked me, and bade me good night. I hope I'll never see his face again. I got into bed and couldn't sleep for a long time. When I examined the 5 guineas this morning that I left on the table drawer last night, I found 5 withered leaves of oak. Oh, bad luck to the giver. Well, you may think all the fright and joy and
the grief of the poor man was in when the woman finished her story. They talked and they talked, but we didn't mind you that they said till Friday night came, when both were standing where the mountain road crosses the one going to the Ross. There they stood, looking towards the bridge of Thowler, in the dead of night, with a little moonlight shining over the Comachington. One she gave a start, and by this and that, he says, here they come, bridles jingling and feathers tossing. He looked, but could see nothing, and she stood trembling, and her eyes wide open, and looking down the way toward to Balincola. "I see your wife," she says, "riding just on the outside as to rub against us. We'll walk on quietly, as if we expect nothing, but when you are passing I'll give you a shove. If you don't do your duty then, woe be with you." Well, they walked on easy, and the poor hearts beating in both their breasts, though he could see nothing. He heard a faint jingle and trampling and rustling. At last he got the push that she had promised. He spread his arms out, and there was his wife's waist within them, and he could see her plain, but such a hullabaloo rose as they were an earthquake, and he found himself surrounded by horrible-looking things, roaring at him and striving to pull his wife away. But he made the sign of the cross and bid them be gone in God's name. and held his wife as if it was iron in his arms and made of his arms were made of. But in one moment everything was silent as the grave, and the poor woman lying in faint in his arms of her husband and her good neighbor. Well, all in good time she was minding her family and her business again, and I'll go bail. After the fright she got, she spent more time on her knees, and avoided ferrymen all of the days of the week, and particularly on Sunday. It is hard to have anything to do with the good people without getting a mark from them. The brave nurse didn't escape no more than another. She was on Thursday at the market at Edmondsworthy, when what did she see walking among the tubs of butter but the dark man, very hungry looking, taking a scoop out of the tub and one or the other. "Oh, sir," she says, very foolish, "I hope your lady is well and the baby." "Pretty well, thank you," says he, rather frightened-like. "How do I look in this new suit?" he says to her. "I can't see you plain at all, sir." "Well, now," says he, getting round her to the other side. "Mush indeed, sir, your coat looks no better than the weathered dock leaf." "Maybe then," he says, "it will be different now." And he struck the eye next to him with a switch. Friends, she never saw a glimmer again after that one till the day of her death. Yikes. You read Falcor, huh? That can be done. Let's make sure I get her name down right. Where's Falcor? Oh, there she is. Okay. Come on. There we go. Alright, well. Thank you all for coming in tonight. I will hopefully see you all Monday for some more Baldur's Gate. Till then, I hope you all have a good night.
In the hollow of the night, shadows weave and twist. The wolf has told his stories, wrapped in mystic mist, lurking in the silence where the echoes softly play, the echoes of forgotten tales dimming as they sway. The hours drip like candle wax, slowly melting gold. Lands of frost and twilight, secrets yet untold. The forest breathes a shiver, its ancient heartbeats thrum. Underneath the silver glow, the wild whispers come. Time to close the book, let the pages fall. You've roamed the winding paths, now heed the twilight.